history is filled with times of superstition, fear, and the torture of innocents. In this video we'll be diving into some of the most heinous of witch trials from the late Middle Ages. This is 5 witch trials and executions. Number 5. Petronilla Demeth. Petronilla Demeth was the maidservant of Dame Alice Keitler, a 14th-century noblewoman who lived in Ireland in what is now County Kilkenny. After the death of Alice Keitler's 4th husband, Alice was accused of practicing witchcraft and Petronilla was charged with being an accomplice of the noblewoman. These accusations came mainly from the children of her late husbands from her previous marriages. Petronilla was tortured and forced to admit that she and her mistress were guilty of witchcraft. She claimed that Alice Keitler allowed a demon to know her sexually, that Alice made potions, and that she also denied the faith of Christ and the Church. Petronilla held that she and her mistress applied a magical potion to a wooden beam in the household, which enabled both women to fly. Petronilla was then forced to make a public proclamation that her and Alice Keitler were both guilty of sorcery. Keitler was able to flee and save her own life, but Petronilla the maid was flogged and eventually burned at the stake on the 3rd of November 1324. She was the first known case in Ireland or Great Britain to receive death by fire for the crime of heresy. Number 4. Janet Horne. Janet Horne and her daughter, who lived in Dornoch, Scotland, were arrested in 1727 and imprisoned on the accusations of her neighbors. Horne was showing signs of becoming senile, and her daughter had a terrible deformity of her hands and feet. The neighbors accused Horne of having used her daughter as a pony and rode her to consort with the devil. The trial was hastily conducted and the sheriff had judged both guilty and sentenced them to be burned at the stake. Janet's daughter managed to escape, but the elderly woman was stripped, smeared with tar, paraded through the town tied to a barrel and burned alive. Only 9 years after her death, the Witchcraft Acts were repealed in Scotland, and since then a monument in Dornoch has been placed, marking the spot of her brutal execution. Number 3. Barbara Dunk. Barbara Dunk was an alleged arsonist, who was accused of witchcraft in the town of Robel, what is now Reszel in Poland, and was part of Prussia at the time. She is considered by many to have been the last woman executed for witchcraft in Europe. In 1806, a devastating fire ravaged the town of Robel, which burned it almost entirely to the ground. Barbara, who was a maid known for her fondness of magic, would be the first one blamed. She was arrested in 1807, and imprisoned in Robel Castle where she was held for 4 years. No evidence of substance was available at the trial, but she was still accused and found guilty of causing the fire. In 1811, Barbara was executed by burning at the stake on a hill outside Robel, though was apparently strangled to death by the executioner before the fire was set. It is believed today that a group of Polish soldiers were the actual arsonists, and that Barbara may have just been a sacrifice by the Prussian authorities to appease an outraged public. Number 2. Catherine Manvuzan. Catherine Manvuzan was a French fortune-teller and professional provider of alleged sorcery. She was the head of a network of fortune-tellers in Paris providing poison, aphrodisiacs and abortion. Her purported organization was suspected to have killed 1,000 people with poison, but it is believed that upwards of 2,500 people might have been murdered by this fortune-teller and her organization. For a time, priests were beginning to report a growing number of churchgoers confessing to poisoning in their confessions, and people accused of being witches were abducting children for black masses. This led to the fortune-teller Magdalene de la Grange being arrested for poisoning, and in an appeal for mercy she claimed information about crimes of high importance. The arrest of this successful fortune-teller made the police aware that there existed a network of them in Paris, who dealt in the distribution of poison and other diabolical practices. After a long investigation into the large crime network, Catherine Manvuzan was arrested outside Notre Dame de Bonne Nouvelle. She was put on trial, and was convicted of witchcraft and sentenced to execution by burning 2 days later. In the days following her verdict until her execution, she was formally interrogated under torture, and the official document stated that she was tortured enough to beg for mercy. Catherine was executed in public on the Place de Grève in Paris on the 22nd of February 1680. On her way to her execution, she reportedly pushed away the priest, and when fastened on the stake, she desperately pushed away the hay around her before she was set alight. Number 1. Jane Wenham. Jane Wenham was a widow who brought a charge of defamation against a farmer in response to an accusation of witchcraft. She approached the local justice of the peace, Sir Henry Chauncey, and he referred the matter to the local church leader, who awarded her with compensation of 1 shilling. She was disappointed with this outcome, and it was reported that she said she would have justice in some other way, supposedly then bewitching a servant at the local church. A warrant for Jane's arrest was issued by Sir Henry Chauncey, who gave instructions that she be searched for witch marks, a demon's claw mark across her flesh or a raised bump somewhere on her body, similar to a wart in appearance. She was asked to repeat the Lord's Prayer, and was brought before the assize court on the 4th of March 1712. A number of villagers gave evidence that she practiced witchcraft, but the judge was clearly more skeptical than the jury, when an accusation of flying was made, and the judge remarked that flying was technically not a crime. Jane Wenham was released, but needed to be removed from her village for her own safety, fearing what the disgruntled villagers might do, spending her final years under the protection of the church. Shortly before her death, she would be visited by Bishop Francis Hutchinson, the author of the historical essay concerning witchcraft. He had met other survivors of witch hunts, and had an extremely rational approach to the subject, regarding their persecution as hysterical superstition. She died in 1730, and is regarded to have been the last witch trial in England. That was 5 witch trials and executions. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one.